You're gonna
Right.
start Kes Yud.
Starting from Kes Yud. Okay, so get Kereach. A get Kereach is when you have a get Mekushar. So we see that there are two different types of get. There's a get Pashut, which is normal klaf, and you write the shtar on it, and you have the Adam sign on the bottom. A get Mekushar is a tied up get, literally. It's they used to make it specifically for Kohanim, because they wanted to create a little bit of friction and make it a little more difficult for a Kohen to write out a get, because once a Kohen writes a get, it's irrevocable. He can't take his wife back after he's divorced her. So they used to make it a little more difficult, and put a little bit more of a bit more friction. Now, get Kereach is a get Mekushar that hasn't had doesn't have enough signatories on it. Okay, so a get Kereach, a kol mishal min alav. So,
I'm confused on one part. Unless I'm reading it wrong and you're interpreting it the correct way, whatever. My Yud Ket Yud is different than what you're saying. They're calling it. They start off with saying a bald get may be completely.
Bald get. Yeah, that's right, a bald get.
Okay, that's so good.
I'm just giving you background here. We're talking about the bald get.
Okay, all right, good.
So now a get Kereach, a get Mekushar requires 3 signatories on it. But because this is an institution of Rabbanan, they were a little more makil about the 3rd signatory. You need 2 kosher edim at least on the get, but the 3rd one is what we're saying, is that a get Kereach is a get Mekushar where there are fewer signatories and folds. You'd have to the way you do it is you tie it, and on each fold you'd have a signatory on each fold. Okay, and so if you've got let's say 3 folds and 2 signatories, that's called the get Kereach. It's a bald get. There's an empty space. So how do you complete it? Anyone is allowed to fill that in. Divrei ben nanas. So said ben nanas. Anyone, doesn't have to be a kosher aid. Can be so the Gemara explains about this that he's talking about who else. What do you allow? Even people who psula edus, even people who pass for edus, like a gunner or gamblers, and the people who typically aren't who typically wouldn't accept as an aid. They can be the 3rd aid in the
slaves, thieves who are disqualified to testify in a court of law. Anyone can sign this, get the signature. Right.
Rabbi Akiva Omer ein mashlimin alav ela krovim haruin lahid b'makom acher. Rabbi Akiva says no. We are more makil on the aidim, but on the 3rd aid at least, but only to the point where we'll allow a relative, right? Somebody who's possible aid is the gabe, the man or the woman, can nonetheless be an aid over here, because he says, Rabbi Akiva, we don't want people to look at this and say, oh, this guy's a kosher aid, and allow him to give aid somewhere else. But if it's a relative, everyone knows who's a relative and who's not. And what's the risk? So he'll be allowed to testify about something else? Okay, that's fine. He is allowed to. So he says that Rabbi Akiva's kula only extends to the fact that the relatives are just possible gabe this particular case. But in general, they kosher aidim. The Ezer who get Kereach, and what is the definition of a get Kereach? Kol shekasharav merubin me'edav. Any get mekushar where there are more folds than there are where there are more folds than there are aidim. Okay. If a man divorces his wife and says to her, okay, you can marry anyone except Fred. Rabbi Eliezer matir. Rabbi Eliezer says it's a good get, we just ignore the clause where he says you can't marry Fred, because he just doesn't have the authority to do that. A gerushin is a complete severing of the link between the husband and the wife, and he has no authority to tell her who not to marry. He just says, okay, it's a get, and she can ignore the bit about not marrying Fred. The Chachamim Osrin, Chachamim say, nope, you cannot do that. It's not a good get. Okay, because when he dismisses her, it has to be a complete and unconditional dismissal. Ketzad Yaseh, what does he have to? What should he do if he did this? If he did give her the get and say you can marry anyone except for Fred, Yitzlena, he must take the get back. And he must give it back to her, saying you are now allowed to marry any man. Otherwise, the get is ineffective. Okay, he can use the same document because it's still the same shtar, and it's not a psul in the shtar itself. It's just a psul in the way it was handed over. So he needs to take it back and do it again. However, if he included it in the text of the get that you're allowed to marry any man except Fred, even though he goes back and erases that clause from the get, pasul, that get is just completely invalid, and I think even Ben Nanas Rabbi Eliezer would agree with that. Okay, Mishna Beis if he says now you're allowed to marry any person except my father or your father or my brother or your brother, le'eved v'lanochri, or l'chol mi she'ein la alav kiddushin, any man that she has that there's just no shaychus of kiddushin because it's an erva, and if they did marry her, then it would be completely ineffective. So that's nothing, right? So that clause actually meant nothing, and therefore the get is completely kosher. It's ki'ilu he said nothing anyway. Harayat muteres lechol adam elel almana lekohen gadol apirush lechilutz lekohen hediot mamzeres anasin Yisrael bas Yisrael mamzer anasin lechol mi sheyesh alav kiddushin afilu ba'avera pasul. But if, however, he says to her, you are now allowed to marry anyone except Shlomi HaKohen. Okay, now obviously she's a divorcee, so she's not allowed to marry a Kohen. However, the difference is that if the Kohen actually had to marry her, the Kiddushin would work. So and she would be considered ish afilu ba'avera, even though so if he makes this condition, then we go back to Mishnah Aleph, because you see he's not severing his links with her. He is trying to put a condition on who she can and cannot marry. And even though the hypothetical marriage would be about Be'avera, it is not permitted. You have a distinction.
You said before that if he had to marry her, and then you went on with this whole statement, why would he have to marry her? I
had to, as in speculative. If he were to marry her.
Okay.
All right, that was yesterday's Mishnah. Today's Mishnah started with Gimel. Gufo shall get. What is the essential text of a get? That actually is the key phrase of the get, is that you are now permitted to marry any man, because that's really the essence of the marriage, of the essence of Kiddushin, is that she is mekudash to this man. She is singled out and assigned only to him, right? And now the get, it removes that bond between them, so that she's now permitted to any man. Rabbi Yehuda Omer v'din dihave leichi minai sefer teirochin ve'igores shibukin v'get biturin mahach lehith nachsa lechol devad the sitzpin. So Rabbi Yehuda adds on to it that furthermore, if we translate this should be for you from me a sefer, a scroll of separation, and a letter of give me the English of what how to translate what was Aramaic.
Is the essence of a document or emancipation is you are a free woman and you are to yourself. That's what it says.
Okay. The previous phrase. What does Rabbi Yehuda? How does Rabbi Yehuda say it?
Rabbi Yehuda says, "And this which shall be to you from me is a writ of divorce, a letter of abandonment, a bill of release to go to be married to any man that you want."
Okay, so he adds in a lot more text to the get, and actually the halacha does follow Rabbi Yehuda, that the text of the get does include all of this that Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Gufa shall get shechrur. Now, similarly, while we're talking about divorces, we also talk about the get shechrur for a slave. Is that what's the text of the get shechrur for a slave? Hare at baschorin. Here you are a freed woman. Now, why does it talk about in the feminine? I guess because we were talking about a woman in the divorce, so we're also talking about a bondswoman who's being freed. So now you are a free woman, hare at la'atzmech, and you are in your own domain. Okay, we do have alternative versions of the text in the masculine form, because hare at in Aramaic, at can be for a man or for a woman. Okay. Mishna Daled. Shlosha Gittin Psulim Be'im Niseis Havlad Kasher. So there are three versions, three types of Gittin, which lechatchila are pasul. That Chazal said we don't want people to write a get like this. But nonetheless, when Chazal said this, they also, it's important to say that Chazal themselves said that if nonetheless a woman went and remarried on the strength of one of these pasul Gittin, we don't make a fuss about it, and her children from the second marriage are kosher, not mamzer. Okay, what are these specific cases? Kasav bichsav yado ve'en alav edim. So let's say the husband himself wrote his get and didn't put edim on it. Okay, why is this sort of okay? Because we recognize his handwriting, and the real effect of the get is happened from the Masira, not from the edim on the get itself. And if anyone and if he wants to come and dispute it, well, I mean, you've got the edim of the Masira, and you've got the fact that it's in the husband's handwriting. So no, not such a big deal. It's not the best way to do it, and we don't want people to do this, but nonetheless, we're not going to make trouble for the woman if she remarries on this. Okay, second case. Yesh alav edim ve'en bozman. The edim are written on the get, but there's no date written on the get. Okay, you want to have a date on it for to know exactly when this happened, and it may come to some issues. But nonetheless, the fact is that the date of the get is not as important as the date on which the get was handed over. It's the handing over that makes the get effective. A person could have written the get a year ago and handed over to his wife today, and it's still an effective get as long as he wasn't in yichud with her, according to Beis Hillel. And so it's not the date on the get that's really the important thing; it's the date of the Masira that's important. Okay, and the third case, yesh bo zman ve'en bo ela eid echad. It's got a date on it, but there's only one aid signed on the get. Okay, so this is talking about where the husband wrote the get in. The Gemara explains that this is where the husband actually wrote it in his handwriting, and the Mishna is coming to teach us that even though there's a date and there's an aid on it, you're not allowed to give a get like this. But and a woman should not remarry using this get lechatchila. But nonetheless, we're not going to make a fuss about it, because again, it's got the husband's handwriting on it, and therefore it's with the avad. We're not going to make a fuss for her if she has remarried on the basis of this. Okay. So it's these three specific cases, and the Mishnah is at pains to point out that it's only these specific three cases. This is lafuke, other cases where the get is possible for other reasons, and therefore, if she uses a get like that and to remarry, then the blood would be a mamzer from a second marriage. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, afal pi she'ein alav edim ela shenesano b'fnei edim kasher. So Rabbi Eliezer says that Elazar, not Eliezer. Even though there are no witnesses on the get at all, but he gave it to her in front of edim, it's nonetheless kasher. Okay, it's still a good get, and lechatchila she's allowed to marry from this, because the edim masira are the important thing. Okay, as we've said before, and furthermore, she'll be allowed to collect her ksubah from nechasim meshubadim, that she still maintains her lien over his property from the ksubah, and if he had sold some of his property, if he'd sold his property to somebody else, she can claw back the property in order to claim a kesubah. The only reason why we have Aiden to sign on the get is in order to prevent the husband from being ma'arer. That the husband shouldn't come back a year later and say, hey, this is a forged get, nobody signed in it, nobody saw it written. But if you still got the Aiden Nasira, you can call back the Aiden Nasira to say this is a real thing. But you still want to have the Aiden on the get, just that for as an extra safeguard, so that if the husband should come and want to make trouble, say no, we have witnesses that you wrote this get.
When we said before that if the date was left off, but there were witnesses, I thought the date was always a very important thing on a star.
Yes, it is. Absolutely, it is important, and you have to have a date on the get. We're just saying over here that if they forgot to write the date on the get, and they handed it over to her, and she got divorced, and nobody checked the date, and then she got remarried, and then somebody comes and wants to look at her get and says, oh my gosh, you don't have a date on your get. They say, oops, but it's okay.
Because I remember we were talking about like when we did I remember the star when you had the date of the king. This is the year of the king, and so forth. So
so if they put the date, that's right. You have very good. It's a good kasha, because we said if you put a date of a kingdom that's not the right kingdom or whatever, then that actually puzzles the get completely.
Right.
And the blood is mamzer and everything. So no date is better than a puzzle date.
Right. Okay. Good. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Right. Mishna hey. Shnaim sheshalchu shnei gittin shavin v'nisarvu. Okay, so now you've got two guys who both decided to divorce their wives, and they're both called Shimon ben Ruvain, and their wives are both called Leah bas Abraham. Right, so the two Gittin are actually identical.
Right.
I guess this is a hypothetical case because the odds on this are extremely slim, but nonetheless, it's conceivable. Okay. And they both decide to divorce their wives on the same day, and they both give the Gittin to the same shaliach to go and hand over to their wives. Okay, and the shaliach on his way trips and falls and drops the Gittin, and they fall, and he can't remember whose is whose. Okay, so what's the eight? So now he comes up to these wives and says, "Listen, I've got a get for each of you from each of your husbands, but I don't know whose is whose." So what's the eight? So he says, "No sen shnehem lezo." So he gives both of the Gittin to the one woman, and for sure one of them is hers. And then he takes them both back and he gives them both to the other woman. Okay, and then each of them has received their get and they're both divorced. However, if he lost one get and he doesn't know who the remaining one belongs to, it's batal. He cannot use it because he doesn't know which woman is freeing. So he cannot hand over the Gittin then. Now, another case. So the five guys all get together in the men's club and they all decide they're divorcing their wives. And they say, listen, let's save money on materials and scribes. Let's just all write one big shtar and say that Reuven's divorcing Leah and Shimon's divorcing Rachel, and all these people have it all in one shtar, and we'll hand it over to all of our wives. Okay. Ish ploni megarish plonis or ploni plonis for ha'edim milamata, and they go outside and they get some edim, and the two witnesses sign on the bottom of the shtar. So you've got five Gittin, one after the other, and two edim at the bottom. Okay. Kulan ha'edim milamata, kulan kishen v'inasin lechol achas ve'achas. Okay, sorry, beg your pardon. I gave you the wrong case. This is the case where they write out one shtar and says this, inside one paragraph, they enumerate all five people who are divorcing all their wives inside one paragraph, and you've got Edom over there. They're all kosher, and they've got to hand the shtar one by one to each of the wives in turn in order for it to be kosher. Okay, she doesn't have to hold on to it. 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 She doesn't have to hold on to it they just have to be able to hand it over to each wife. Okay. However, if they wrote one paragraph for each husband and wife, and the Adim at the bottom, only the bottom get is kosher.
Right.
Because that's the only one that's got Adim at the bottom. The other ones have no Adim, they're possible. Okay. Again, this is bearing in mind what we just read in the previous Mishnayos. They're pasul lechatchila, but if they went ahead and handed these Gittin to all these women and they didn't know any better, and the first 4 women went and remarried, that falls under the klal of they know Adim on the get, but it's got the husband's signature on it. But if it was written by the husband, let's say, if it was written by the husband, because you can't have it without the husband's handwriting and without the Adim. All right. That's all of the Mishnahs for yesterday and today. Okay, fine. Vav Hey.
Sota.
No, still Gittin. Vav Hey.
Oh, I thought I heard you say that was it for today. All right. Okay, Vav Hey. If one says, write a get and give it to my wife, divorce her, or write a letter and give it to her, they may write and give it. If he said, release her, provide for her, do as for her as is customary, or do you do for her as is proper, he did not say anything. Originally, they said if one goes out in chains and says, write a get for my wife, they are write and give it. They later said, also one who goes out to sea and one who lives in a caravan. Shimon Suri says, also one who is in danger. If someone was thrown into a pit and he said that whoever hears his voice should write a get for his wife, they shall write and give it. If a healthy man said, write a get for my wife, he desired to taunt her. And it happened that the healthy man said, write a get for my wife, and he went up to the top of the roof and he fell and died. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, sages said if he fell on his own, if it is a get. If the wind pushed him, it is not a get. If someone said to 2 persons, give a get to my wife, or to 3, write a get and give it to my wife, they shall write and give it. If he said to 3, give it a get to my wife, they may tell others to write it because he designated them as a court. These are the words of Reb Meir, and Reb Hanina ben Ono brought this law from prison. I have a tradition regarding one who says to 3, give a get to my wife, that they may tell others to write it because he designated them as a court. Said Reb Yossi, he said to the messenger, we also have a tradition that even if they said to the great court in Yerushalayim, give a get to my wife, and they must learn and write and give it. And he said to 10, write a get for my wife, 1 writes and 2 sign. If he said all of you write, 1 writes and they all sign. Therefore, if one of them died, the get is null.
Okay.
All right.
Next up is Sota Gimel Vav. I need to give my wife a ride to the train station very soon. So, yeah, you know what? Let's just finish Seder Nashim. Let's quickly do Sota, and then I'll have to leave.
Okay. Gimel Vav. If a mincha offering became tummy before it was sanctified in a service vessel, it is like all the mincha offerings, and it may be redeemed. And if after it was sanctified to a service vessel, it is like all other mincha offerings that must be burned. These are the ones whose mincha offerings must be burned. One who says, I am defiled to you, or about whom witnesses testify that she is defiled. And one who says, I will not drink, or whose husband does not want to give her to a drink, or whose husband had cohabitated with on the way. The mincha offerings, all of all who are married in Kohanim, 2 Kohanim must be burned. If the daughter of a non-Kohen married a Kohen, her mincha offerings must be burned. But if the daughter of a Kohen married a non-Kohen, her mincha offering is eaten. How does a mincha Kohen differ from a daughter of a Kohen? The mincha offering of a Kohen's daughter is eaten, while the mincha offering of a Kohen is not eaten. And the Kohen's daughter can be disentitled, for a Kohen cannot be disentitled. A Kohen's daughter may be contaminating herself with the tumah of the dead, but a Kohen may not contaminate himself with the tumah of the dead. A Kohen may eat of the most holy offerings, but the daughter of a Kohen may not eat the most holy offering. How does a man differ from a woman? A man who is in Torah must allow his hair to grow and must rend his garments, but a woman need not let her hair grow or rend her garments. A man can impose a vow of a Naziris on his son, but a woman cannot impose a vow of Naziris on her son. A man can shave his head at the conclusion of his Naziris, but on the basis of the Naziris offerings of his father, but a woman cannot shave her head on the basis of the Naziris offering of her father. A man can sell his daughter, but a woman cannot sell her daughter. A man can betroth his daughter, but a woman cannot betroth her daughter. A man is stoned naked, but a woman is not stoned naked. A man's body is hung, but a woman's body is not hung. A man can be sold for his theft, but a woman cannot be sold for her theft.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go at this point.
Okay.
Okay, have a good day.
See you tomorrow. Okay, thank you so much. Have a good day. Thank you.
Cheers.